In this next program, so first of all, let's create a new program. We'll save it as calc.rb, paste in the code. So let's walk through this. So we're doing the same thing as before. We're printing out enter a number first equals gets.chomp.toI. So you know what this does. We're asking for user input with gets. We're chomping off the new line, which comes from hitting the enter key. And then we're doing this toI, which you haven't seen before. And what this does is it converts a string into an integer if it can be converted into an integer. So, for instance, so somebody enters a number, so they type 4. When it comes in through chomp, or through gets rather, it's actually a string, which is text. But to do math with it, which is what we want to do here, we actually need to convert it into a number. So toI converts that to an integer, which is another way to say a whole number. So if somebody enters a decimal, it's actually going to chop off the decimal and just keep the whole number portion of it. So let's run this and see what happens. So enter a number, I'll do 4 and then 2, and 4 times 2 equals 8. So now we can do kindergarten math, or first grade, I don't know when you learn that stuff. Anyway, so let's go through the rest of this. So this first bit that we talked about does exactly what we talked about before. The next part is really simple, but it's a really, really powerful concept in programming. And if you've never encountered this before, this is really important, and you should practice writing as many functions as you can. But what we're doing here is we're creating a function, and in Ruby, you do that by this def keyword, short for definition. And you always end with end. So we create a function, we give it a name called multiply. And in the reality, we would never actually create a function called multiply because we already have this star, which is the multiply, so it's just creating a function that performs the exact same thing as another function. But it's useful to just see how this works. So we're creating a function, and we give it 2 parameters that we need to give it. So num1 and num2. And then whatever the parameters are, we just take the first one and multiply it times the second one. And then you can see here, we'll just walk through the rest of this and then we'll come back and go over this some more. So then we set the answer equal to multiply first times second. So if we go back, if we walk through this really slowly, because for some of you this is going to be super easy, for some of you this might be totally new, so I'm going to try to go through this painfully slowly. So first, which we have here, is what we're setting equal to the first number entered. Second is what we're setting equal to the second number entered. So at this point here, this should be equal to a number, in our case 4 in the example that I just did, and this should be equal to a number 2 in the example that I just did. So if we look at what's happening, it's saying multiply, and then 4, it's like, imagine this is like a slot. So we have 4 goes in the first slot, 2 goes in the second slot, so then these get passed down into the function, so we have 4 times 2. And then, that returns 8, which we talked about returns in the previous video. So it returns 8, so we're setting answer equal to the return value of this. Okay, so just in case that didn't sink in, let me run through it really quick. So pass in 4, pass in 2, in our example that I just did in the terminal, it could be any number, multiply those together, and then it gets returned and set equal to answer. One thing that I guess I haven't actually specified yet, in most programming languages you're going to see something like this. It's going to explicitly say return. In Ruby, whatever is on the last line of a function gets automatically returned. You can put return if you want. You can see that it gets highlighted as a keyword and it does the exact same thing. But at any rate, this gets returned. So whatever this evaluates to gets returned, and so answer gets set equal to 8, and then we're doing our string stuff again. So we're passing it in. 4 times 2 equals 8. Make sense? Okay, so we have one more program to go through. So let's go back to the code, and I've already created a new file called weburl.rb, and I pasted the code in from the site exactly. So let's save this, and let's go back to the terminal, and as you can see I'm still in the VM, Ruby web URL, and that's going to be whatever you called the file. I just called mine web URL. Oh, I'm in the wrong directory. So cd/vagrant, make sure you're in the right place, ls cd projects / what did I call it? CD first programs. Okay, now let's try this again. Usually you can go back through the commands you ran by hitting the up arrow. So Ruby weburl.rb. If you ever see that no such file or directory, web URL, whatever, what that's telling you is you're probably in the wrong place. It's one really important thing is always read the error message and try to understand what it says. A lot of times people just see that there was an error and they're intimidated because this is not something they're used to, and they just freak out and say it's broke. So what you really need to do is just read the error message, try to understand what's probably causing that. You could easily just type ls, and it's going to tell you that there's nothing in that directory called weburl.rb. So in any case, I changed directories, now I'm in the right place, so I'm going to run this. Enter a website domain you like. Okay, so it doesn't print anything out because our program is not designed to do that. But we come back over here, and it has created a file called techmaker.html, which is all the stuff from our website. So back here, let's walk through the program. So the first thing we're doing is we're requiring this thing called OpenURI. I'm not really going to get into what that is, but it's software that comes with Ruby that you can require. It's not automatically included every time you run Ruby programs, but it's one of these things that it's like you can include it, and it will give you a lot of extra functionality.